While you're looking at every professional relationship, I want you to keep these two visuals in mind as you assess their functioning health, the resources that you're putting into them, and how you can enhance them. You've seen the boundaries one last week. So just as a reminder, you're not trying to set walls. You're trying to set up boundaries as you're having healthy relationships. And professional relationships are no different. So I'm not going to go over that visual again, but I just wanted to remind you of that as you're assessing them. But I do want to note the champagne tower. Anybody who has ever seen a champagne tower poured knows that you've got to pour the champagne into the top cup, and then when that top cup is full, all the excess champagne goes down into the other cups to fill them. That's how I want you to think about yourself from an energy flow. Until your own top cup is full, you don't have excess energy to give to anybody else. So it's not selfish, it's actually regenerating everyone. It's better for everyone. Because if you're pouring from the side of the champagne tower, right, all the other cups will never get filled. That's the way I want you to think about your energy flow as you're dealing with any relationships, and particularly professional relationships. So as we talk about healthy professional relationships, don't forget the materials from the past 3 weeks, because it's still relevant, right? In setting up healthy professional relationships, just as well as it's important for setting up other types of relationships. But let's dig in a little bit more to how to really dissect professional relationships. When I was looking at resources to help you guys identify toxic management behavior or toxic behavior in professional relationships, I really love this chart by Jacob Boven, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. He said, any of these behaviors destroys all good initiatives, kills motivation and engagement, and can lead organizations to the edge of the cliff or beyond. I also want to note that even if you're not a leader or a manager, these are still really relevant to how you show up as a leader or an influencer, even not formally. And these rules should apply to you as you evaluate your leadership that you report into. It's as equally as important to evaluate your own behaviors. I'm not going to go through every single one on the slide, but I do want you to pause this and take time to look at it and really reflect on how you show up in your professional relationships, and do you have any toxicity as it relates to how you show up. And then as you're looking at your professional relationships with leaders or managers, peers or colleagues, similarly. And so let's for example's sake dissect this, right? And put it into you as an individual or you as an individual contributor, just so you can see an example. So for example, divide to control. Is there anything that you do or others around you do that make it so there's no team unity or trust? Are people dividing team members? Is there gossip? Is there anything going on that creates toxicity? Right? Do you do that? Do your leaders do that? Do your professional colleagues do that? It's really important to be able to identify those behaviors that are not healthy so you can change them or create change or communicate or influence, right? So it's really important to think about. Similarly, Jacob Boven developed 7 traits of exceptional leaders, and he developed it based on the learning and quotes of leadership gurus, right? And so this is essentially a chart of how do you turn those toxic behaviors around? What are you looking for? And I love that he shared the quotes, and I've shared some of them. If you want to see all of them, I've given you the link to where you can find where he writes about this. But again, I want you to reflect on you, how you show up at work, how you show up in your professional relationships. Because according to Jacob, and frankly us, the lesson is simple. Avoid the toxicity and replace them with healthy management habits or healthy individual habits. So similarly, do you show up with integrity or trust? Or do others around you show up with integrity and trust? Are you effectively communicating? In professional relationships, are others effectively communicating? So again, I'm not going to go through all of the 7 traits, but when you're looking at this, really pause, ask yourself the questions: how do you show up? How do others show up in professional relationships? And then really start thinking about how you can create change to make all of your professional relationships more healthy. So let's dig in a little bit more into how to tactically assess all of your professional relationships. We're big on giving you tools to be able to create change. We're just not talking heads here. And so it's important to start thinking about this for yourself. Now, with any class, we give you some tools for you to get you started. You may have other tools that you want to dissect and go more into in methodologies, but we want to give you a snapshot of how do you become your own guru? How do you start thinking about those professional relationships for yourself? We really loved Coach Matt Cockray's calendar energy audit. What his calendar energy audit is, and so we kind of adapted it for this exercise. What his calendar energy audit was a strategic approach how to assess your daily activities aligned with your energy levels and productivity. On Tim Ferriss's podcast, he said we all feel like we have limited time, but that's not the case. What we really have is limited energy. And if we start doing more things that raise our energy, it actually enables us to do more things in general. It's much easier to remove energy draining activities than it is to add energy raising ones. And so we took this concept because the same is true with people and relationships and professional relationships. And we adapted the concept for assessing professional relationships. So take time going through this audit, and as always, be raw and honest with yourself. What I want you to do is think about every single professional relationship that you're engaging in. And I have some steps for you to take a look at. So let's go through them. And you see the energy givers with a green, plus sign. Those are things that actually add to energy. And then, as you might imagine, energy takers in the red are things that take away energy. And so I'd suggest that you do a list of everyone that you interact with in your professional life, and then follow these steps. So the first one is you want to review your individual interactions for the past week or month or whatever period of time that makes sense with each person, person by person. You want to do it individually. And then for each interaction, I want you to assess whether that interaction added energy or drained your energy. And you can use the philosophies on the chart as some lenses to look through, but feel free to add your own. And then look for any trends on the interactions that drained your energy. Why did they drain your energy? And then strategically decide if it's the person or the dynamic of the interaction. And it may take some time to suss this out. And then what I want you to do is ask yourself, does this relationship need to happen? We all know that within work and professional settings, that some relationships that aren't so healthy have to happen. So what do you do if it has to happen? So if it's yes, I want you to think about, is there a boundary that you can set to turn around the dynamic? And we talked all about boundaries in the earlier weeks. And or can you limit your interactions with that person? Is there anything that you need to change in your mindset? And what I mean by that is in week 1, we talked about observing your own toxic behavior. Is there anything that you're complicit in that you can change that'll create a domino effect on all the interactions as a result? And also, if your answer is yes, this relationship does need to happen, I also want you to think about one small thing that you can do for yourself that will make any interaction more joyful or enjoyable for you, even if it's telling yourself something on your inside voice in your head, singing a song or doing a little ditty or whatever it is for you. Just create one small tool for yourself to raise your energy vibration or make it more enjoyable for you or less painful. Assessing the health of professional relationships is crucial for both sustainability and effectiveness. So we wanted to give you some other considerations as you're looking at all of your professional relationships. So here's some things to think about. The first one is trust and transparency. Really think about, in those relationships, do you have trust and transparency? Are your team members, are the people you're relating to, comfortable sharing ideas, concerns, and feedback openly? Is there a sense of psychological safety within the team or the partnership or the relationship? So that's really the first one. And again, you want to take this and do this throughout the week as you're dissecting your relationships. So take your time with it. The next thing is thinking about communications. We've talked about this because it's so important in any relationship in the previous weeks. But what you really want to do is evaluate the clarity and frequency of your communications with any of these professional relationships. Are the messages understood correctly, and are the expectations clear? Are there efficient communications channels that match what both parties in the relationship prefer? And are there any ideas for areas of improvement, such as active listening or clarity in conveying the information? Is there anything that's inferred that keeps popping up in the communication that you can solve to make it enhanced? The next one is collaboration. Really think about the level of collaboration and cooperation among the individual members having the relationship. Is there a culture of collaboration where people are willing to support each other and work towards common goals? Is there shared responsibility? Is there a sense of camaraderie? Really reflect on that, both with yourself and the other individuals that you're having the professional relationships with. The next thing is conflict resolution. We've talked about this so many times over the last month. You really want to assess how conflicts are handled within the relationship. Really think about the ability of the relationships, the individuals in the relationships, to be able to resolve conflicts constructively without damaging the relationship or without hindering productivity. Look for signs of open communication and the willingness to listen, and really focus on setting up a win-win. Keep in mind, you're all in the same team at the end of the day, going back to those shares, values, and goals. What are you trying to get out of that? And work towards that, and leave ego at the door. You really also want to evaluate your professional relationships. You want to build in mechanisms for regular insights and regular feedback of the health of not only all of your professional relationships, but individual relationships. So encourage open dialogue and honest feedback from all of those relationships. Use one-on-one conversations or 360-degree feedback or whatever you want to do to gather comprehensive insights. Because you're not only looking at individual relationships that you're having, but you're looking for trends. Are there similar trends that keep coming up that you need to focus on to enhance all of your professional relationships? And then you want to look at emotional well-being, and that's for everyone in the relationship, all individuals. Look at it from, is it supportive? Is it empathetic? Does it acknowledge the emotional needs of everyone? Really look at, are there levels of stress or burnout? Is everyone satisfied? And is it overall emotionally healthy? And the last one is, be willing to embrace growth and set up a tone or a foundation or a safe space for others to be able to adapt and change and overcome challenges. You want to be able to have resilience in the face of setbacks and really learn and grow together as you're evaluating those relationships. And again, feel free to add other considerations, key considerations, as you're reflecting and assessing your relationships. But these are some things to really focus on as you're looking at how do I build healthy relationships professionally moving forward. We wanted to remind you that as you're building out healthy professional relationships, don't forget to assess how you're doing on areas of improvement and your strengths in professional relationships. Everyone brings baggage into relationships, and it's no different at work. And so really think about, if you keep having a similar situation pop up with multiple different people, stand back, and I think we've talked about this before with you guys, stand back and say, what am I making it mean? Look at it as an observer. Don't jump in the mix. Kind of observe the storm. Hold the storm in your hand and really think about, what is the storm doing? What are the commonalities? How can I be better, do better? The second thing is, don't forget about the boundaries, because like we've talked about, boundaries are absolutely essential in any type of relationship. So really don't forget about those. And then the third thing is, really think about actively building, consciously building communities of support in your workday and in your work life and in your work relationships. You want to be strategic about it. You want it to be, you're there for however many hours you are throughout the day, and you want to make sure it's a place that you want to go. You want it to be healthy for you. And so make sure you're consciously aware of building a community that's supporting and loving and professional. Again, you don't have to be best friends, but you want to make sure that you're having a healthy, not only healthy interactions and healthy relationships, but also layer on top of that a really consciously healthy community of support. All right. As with anything, we talk about, hey, how's it doing? We assess ourselves, but without kind of putting actions into place, you hear it from us 6 million times throughout these weeks and throughout these learnings. Without action planning and kind of taking action, no change happens, right? And so how do you start building those healthy relationships starting today? Hopefully by now, you've gone through every single professional relationship that you have, and you've assessed it based on the earlier content in this presentation. So now, what steps should you take? So looking at your relationships, are there relationships that you need to cut off or minimize? The second piece is, what are some boundaries that you need to put in place or enforce with the relationships that are going to remain? And then what I want you to do is craft your strategy. How are you going to communicate changes within the interactions? Or what are the behaviors going to be from you that'll create that change within the interactions? Now remember, the only one you can control is you. You can't control the outcomes. You can't control how someone else is going to act. You can only control what you say and what you do. So stick to that. You have the power to create a different dynamic in all these relationships. So what is the most effective strategy that you're going to take in order to do that with each individual? And then be solution oriented. Be discerning, be flexible, be adaptable, and really go in with the attitude of setting up a win-win and shared goals. Just because there's all sorts of history of friction or conflict or whatever it is, go in with a fresh mind, a fresh perspective. You're going to turn this around and make those relationships healthy. What can you do today or tomorrow to make that relationship healthy? And keep in mind, it's an evolution, right? Just because you're changing doesn't mean someone else is going to immediately react to it. So it may take trial and error, just with anything that we're learning here. It may be a little bit of trial and error, but keep adjusting it, keep evolving it, and really look at being strategic about managing those relationships because you have the power to do that. The other thing I want to make sure you're doing is, as you're looking at professional relationships for yourself, I really want you to think about, and this lends itself to number 3 we were talking about before, is kind of consciously building a supportive community professionally. Really think about expanding the relationships at work if you don't have a diverse network, right? Just because they don't work on your team or in your vertical or you don't interact with them daily does not mean that that's not valuable. So really look at that and cultivate a diverse network that meets your needs in a way that works for you. Plus, it'll help you from a professional standpoint. The second thing is, you really want to prioritize your relationship resources because you have so many competing demands. And what I mean by that is, we looked at in earlier weeks your time pie. And so much like you dissected your time pie and how you're spending your time in relationships, think of this as a micro focus on that time pie you spend at work for work relationships. What do you need to do? What are going to be the relationships that you're proverbially taking out slices of that time pie? And make sure they're healthy slices of that time pie and adjust accordingly. And then lastly, you may want to think about creating a relationship matrix. And what I mean by that is, look at the buckets. Are you just with team members? Say you're in finance. Are you just focusing on building relationships with accounting and finance? Or because you deal with marketing as a finance person, you're dealing with marketing day to day. You only have relationships in the marketing department, but you don't have any contacts in the operations department. So you can look at it functionally. You can look at it kind of level-wise in your day-to-day work. But I also want you to think about it from a level perspective. And what I mean by that is, just because someone's 4 levels above you doesn't mean you can't create a professional relationship. In fact, I would encourage you to do that. So just like we were talking about diversity on the top of this slide, I would also think about that diversity within your buckets of relationships, within your levels of relationships, and within the way you look at how you build that, right? And so what I mean by that is really thinking about building relationships, professional with relationships with people who think very differently than you. Going back to the finance example, if you're someone who's super logical, go make a professional relationship with someone who is super hyper creative. They're always going to look at it from a different perspective, and you'll find that the diversity and inclusion in building your relationships and utilizing those conversations is always going to expand and grow how you think about yourself professionally, as well as how you think about initiatives within the organization. So now that we've talked about kind of your action plan, I'm always a fan of giving you some kind of quick tips, things to think about, things to keep in mind. I find in working with so many people that burnout is happening more and more, right? And so as you're dissecting this, keep in mind, just kind of keep this reminder in the back of your head, that work shouldn't be the only identity. Really kind of create buffers for that. Because if you're constantly stressed at work and bringing it home and then going back to work, you're stressed at home, it's never going to foster healthy relationships because you're coming from a place of lack. So really think about who you are as a person, and don't let your work identity take over your entire life. Also keep in mind, like attracts like. And what I mean by that is, the energy you're putting into relationships is going to come back at you, whether it's positive or negative. And so really put your focus on cultivating positive thoughts and emotions about creating harmonious relationships and fulfilling relationships in your life, and you'll get the same back. If you struggle with this because there's so much kind of water under the bridge at work, really visualize the kind of relationships you desire and really start thinking about it like it's happening. We've talked about visualizations in past courses as well. Also, reciprocity. You know, every relationship needs give and take. So much like you want to put energy into a relationship, you want to have relationships that are reciprocated, right? And so trust that your acts of kindness are going to be reciprocated, foster mutual trust and reciprocity in all of your relationships, including your professional ones. I mentioned this in the last slide, but I really want to hammer this home. Release the attachment to outcomes that you have. The reality is you cannot control others. And in trying to control, you'll just hurt the relationship. And so all you can do is control yourself, right? So you can control your behaviors. You can control what you're saying, what you're doing, how you're communicating, how you're adjusting, but you can't control them. By relinquishing that attachment, you create this safe space for genuine connection and allow relationships to evolve organically. Also keep in mind, every action has consequence. So be mindful of the impact and behaviors your words have on others. Your words and behaviors have on others. Let me try that again. Be mindful of the impact your words and behaviors have on others, because they can create ripple effects throughout your relationship. Take responsibilities for your actions and strive to act with integrity, kindness, and empathy. Really think about that as you're building these healthy relationships. And then really think about balancing harmony and alignment. And what I mean by that is really strive to resolve conflicts peacefully, come from a place of we're on the same team, communicate transparently and honestly, but do it with respect and understanding. By fostering that harmony within yourself and your relationships, you'll find that you'll get that back more.